do we have here? Once again, the Chiefs and Patrick Mahomes are in the AFC Championship game, the sixth year in a row. How lucky are we as Chiefs fans? I'm just excited because we get to watch one more day of Chiefs football. High stakes environment in Baltimore. The Chiefs handled business versus the Bills last week. What a great game that was. Beating the Bills in their home stadium with their fans throwing snowballs at players in the end zone. I still do not know how that's not being penalized or how that's allowed. It's not cool for those fans to be doing that. But this is RGR Football, Gridiron Lines, your host, Gary McKenzie. If this is your first time here visiting our channel, I want to say thank you for joining. Make sure you hit the like button down below and then subscribe if you're interested in seeing the best Chiefs content on YouTube. Not necessarily speaking about my channel, more or less speaking about RGR Football in general, with Dan, Ryan, and Seth kind of leading the charge there. They all do a great job. I play my little role. So my little role this week, I'm trying to pump some sunshine into this matchup versus the Baltimore Ravens. And I'll tell you what, I look outside my window, and it is cloudy outside. There's no sunshine streaming through. And the same thing can be said about trying to find positives for this Chiefs versus Ravens matchup. Across the board, Baltimore has just played a phenomenal season. They are playing extremely well. They've played extremely well all year long. They've lost 4 games, and there was no pattern with those 4 losses. And really, technically speaking, one of their losses at the end of the season shouldn't count because they were resting their starters. So while I'll admit there are no patterns to follow for, what caused the Ravens to lose those particular games, there are some things that I did take note of. One thing is that the 4 games that the Ravens lost, they lost 2 versus the Steelers, 1 versus Indianapolis, and 1 versus Cleveland. Each one of those teams had something positive about their defense, whether it be their yardage totals allowed, points per game totals allowed, or their pass rush. So these teams that the Ravens lost to, they had some redeeming qualities on the defensive side of the ball. Overall, in regards to the Ravens' entire schedule, they didn't play a whole lot of top 5 defenses. The only top 5 defenses they played were Pittsburgh and San Francisco. And in the games versus Pittsburgh, the first game in week 5, they lost by a score of 10-17. That was their worst loss of the season, in my opinion. Even worse than their loss versus the Colts. Then in week 16, they saw San Francisco, probably the 3rd best defense in the NFL, and they won 33-19. So they hung 33 points on San Francisco's defense. Then they saw Pittsburgh again in week 18. We really can't count this game because they were resting their starters. They lost 10-17 again to Pittsburgh. Something about the way Pittsburgh wins games is they're just one of the most gritty teams that are out there. And I attribute that to Mike Tomlin. I really love him as a head coach. So these defensive teams that the Ravens saw, or lack thereof, did cause them some problems. I think that with only playing 3 games versus top 5 defenses, anything can go for the Chiefs in Baltimore. I do think that the Chiefs defense is going to have to play perhaps its best game of the season for them to have a chance to win in Baltimore. And the Chiefs defense, as it's currently constructed, does not match up very well with what the Ravens want to do. So the Ravens run the ball a lot. They've ran the ball the most in the NFL in 2023. Even their quarterback has over 800 yards rushing. So Lamar Jackson leads the Ravens in rushing yards. He's the rushing yard leader ahead of their number one running back. So when they pass the ball, they're looking to run. And when they run the ball, obviously they're looking to run. And the Chiefs defense has not consistently stopped the run all year long. So the way the Chiefs and Steve Spagnuolo might address this is they could do some things along the personnel side of the ball to bolster their run defense and then sell out versus the run, put Snead and McDuffie and Joshua Williams on an island and try to win the game that way. This, in my opinion, is how you can stymie this Baltimore Ravens offense. Make Lamar Jackson beat you with his arm. Make John Harbaugh and the Ravens offense call passing plays. And hope to God that Snead and McDuffie can come through. So, from a statistical standpoint, the Chiefs' passing defense has been phenomenal. And I think Steve Spagnuolo knows, hey, this is a passing league. There's a lot of things we need to do on the defensive side of the ball to kind of control the passing game. We could play some zone. We could have some zone looks. We can have some zone matching. We can switch routes in the secondary. But to stop the run, there's some sacrifices that have to be made within that game plan where you're going more man-to-man. And you're not going to be doing as many of those switching concepts because you're loading up more in the box. But this is how I think the Chiefs defense is going to want to look at this game versus the Ravens. It'll put a ton of pressure on McDuffie and Snead and the rest of the Chiefs secondary. But to stop this rush attack for the Ravens, if the Chiefs can't stop them from running the ball, they will lose this game. There's no doubt in my mind they'll lose this game if they can't stop Baltimore from running the ball. Moving on to a few other things about this matchup in terms of who could potentially win the Super Bowl. So I took a look at the history of the Super Bowl and point differentials, offensive SRS scores, a handful of different things. And Baltimore right now has the number one point differential. They finished the season with the number one point differential in the NFL with a whopping 203 points as their point differential. That's pretty impressive. And since 1999, which I believe is the passing era of the NFL, that's whenever the greatest show on turf kind of got kicked off. Kurt Warner exploded onto the scene in the NFL. But since 1999, 25% of the Super Bowl winners were number one in point differential. So the team that outscored their opponents the most during the season have won 25% of the Super Bowls. The Chiefs are sixth in point differential, outscoring their opponents by 77 points. And those teams that have finished sixth in point differential actually won 13%, 12.5% of the Super Bowls. So it's not like the Chiefs' point differential of 77 points being ranked number 6 is a major problem. It's not. What is a major problem is their offensive SRS score. So the Chiefs' offensive SRS score is currently negative 0.6. That means they are worse than an average offensive team. And that's for the 2023 regular season. So in the past 24 years, since 1999, only one team has won the Super Bowl that had a negative SRS offensive score, and that was the 2002 Tampa Bay Buccaneers that had that unbelievable cover 2 defense. And the Chiefs, I think while they do have a great defense, I don't think it's as good as that 2002 Buccaneers defense. Offensively speaking for the Chiefs, though, they have one thing going for them, and I don't know how this is possible, but playoff Mahomes has been incredible so far this postseason during these playoffs. The Chiefs scored 26 points versus the Dolphins. They scored 27 points versus the Bills. They're currently averaging 26.5 points these playoffs. And then during the regular season, the Chiefs, averaged around 20 points a game. Not very impressive. So they're 6.5 points above their average in the playoffs, which tells me that I think they figured some things out with this offense. And I've been saying that since the Bengals game, it looked like the Chiefs offense had figured a couple things out. They were kind of going back to some of their roots from 2018. And then in addition to that, they started being a little more conservative and safe with taking care of the ball, kicking the field goals, taking the guaranteed points, and these little things add up on the offensive side of the ball. So do I think that this is the Chiefs team that we saw all the way up until the Bengals game? I don't. I think that this team has hit another level. They are going into this AFC Championship game playing some of their best football of the year. But they've got their work cut out for them because as good as the Chiefs' defense is, the Ravens' defense has been statistically better. So the Ravens are currently ranked number 1 in turnovers forced, number 1 in sacks, number 1 in points allowed. The Chiefs' defense is number 2 in sacks, number 2 in points allowed, number 2 in yards allowed. So these are two very good defensive teams. And I've heard some people saying that they think that the Ravens are going to blow the Chiefs out in this game. And I could not disagree with that more. Neither of these teams gets blown out very often. It's super unlikely. So I think this is going to be a tight game. And in tight games, I really like Patrick Mahomes to come up big in clutch situations. When we were talking earlier at the beginning of the season, we were going over who in this AFC playoff picture or in this AFC picture has the pedigree to thrive in the playoffs. Right now, Lamar Jackson, after winning last week, his career record in the playoffs is 2-3. And he hadn't been in the playoffs for a few years before getting in there this year, and he has looked different. The Ravens team has looked different this postseason. But Patrick Mahomes, by a long shot, has the most experience in the AFC in terms of quarterbacks and playoff success, especially after Joe Flacco got the boot. So the question of this game to me is, if it's going to be a close game, neither team has proven that they're going to get blown out. They don't get blown out very often. And the Chiefs have Patrick Mahomes. I think that's a silver lining for Kansas City, even though there's so many things about this matchup, especially for the Chiefs defense, that don't particularly vibe very well with what the Ravens want to do. So this is going to be a hard game for the Chiefs to win, but I do think it will be close, and they're going to have their chance. They're going to have their chances to win. One thing that matters in close games more than anything are turnovers. So as we mentioned, the Ravens are number 1 in the NFL in forcing turnovers, while the Chiefs did a terrible job of taking care of the ball in 2023. The Chiefs won the turnover differential only 2 times in the entirety of 2023. 2 games. The Ravens, on the other hand, only lost the turnover differential in 4 games. The Ravens have a 2-2 record in those 4 games. The Chiefs have a 2-0 record in the games where they won the turnover differential. If the Chiefs can take care of the ball on the offensive side and tie the turnover differential game, or maybe get lucky and beat out the Ravens in terms of turnover differential. This gives them a chance. But they're going to need a bunch of things going their way. In terms of the quarterback battle, as we mentioned before, I like Patrick Mahomes in a close game over Lamar Jackson. I do. But comparing the two quarterbacks, from what we've heard is that Lamar Jackson is the unanimous MVP. And he, in my opinion, deserves to be the unanimous MVP. But looking at the two quarterbacks' statistics for the season, it just goes to show you how dang good Patrick Mahomes is. So Lamar Jackson, 67.2% completion percentage, 3,678 passing yards, 24 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, a rating of 102.7, and then 821 rushing yards with 5 rushing touchdowns. Then you have Patrick Mahomes, exact same completion percentage as Lamar Jackson, 67.2%, 4,183 passing yards, 27 touchdowns, 14 interceptions, ouch, with a 92.6 rating. Now, Patrick Mahomes' quarterback rating has been much better than that 92.6 in the playoffs. Last week versus the Bills, his quarterback rating was 131.6. So I mentioned that stat last week where the Chiefs now are 9-0 in playoff games where Patrick Mahomes has a quarterback rating above 120. Before I get into the quarterback rating importance for this game, just want to juxtapose Lamar Jackson's season versus Patrick Mahomes' season. So Lamar Jackson has 29 total touchdowns. Patrick Mahomes has 27 total touchdowns. And Lamar Jackson has 4,499 total yards. Patrick Mahomes has 4,572 total yards. The difference between these two are the turnovers. So Mahomes has had nearly as many touchdowns, has had more yards than Jackson, but he's had 7 more interceptions. He's thrown 7 more interceptions, and that's what separates these two. But Patrick Mahomes, back to his passer rating in the playoffs. Chiefs are 9-0 in games where Patrick Mahomes has a quarterback rating above 120 versus road playoff teams. So when Mahomes faces playoff teams on the road, he has a 9-0 record when his quarterback rating is above 120. This is going to be a tall order for the Chiefs this week because the Ravens' passing defense forces the lowest passer rating versus opposing quarterbacks in the entire NFL, and it's a number somewhere in the 70s. That's just insane. So I went back and I looked at the quarterbacks that the Ravens have faced. And they did have some things go their way in this regard, I feel. So they played C.J. Stroud week 1. That was his first start ever. Joe Burrow with the bad calf week 2. Then they saw Gardner Minshew and lost. Then they saw Dorian Thompson-Robinson. Then they saw Kenny Pickett. Then Ryan Tannehill shortly before he got benched. Then they saw Jared Goff. And this was, in my opinion, the first really good quarterback that the Ravens saw, and they destroyed Jared Goff and the Lions. They won 38-6. Then they saw Dobbs with Arizona, Geno Smith week 9, Deshaun Watson week 10. They lost to Deshaun Watson by a score of 31-33. Then they saw Burrow, who got knocked out of the game and replaced with Browning. Justin Herbert, they held him to 10 points. Matthew Stafford, probably the second best quarterback that they faced in 2023, and they won that game 37-31 in overtime. But Stafford made it close. Trevor Lawrence, week 15. I don't know what's going on with Jacksonville's offense. Just sometimes they just disappear. In this game, they did. They lost. Jacksonville lost 23-7. Then they saw Brock Purdy, week 16. Tua Tagovailoa, week 17. Week 18, Mason Rudolph. And then the divisional round, they saw C.J. Stroud again. So they've seen some good quarterbacks. But it's not like they've gone through a gauntlet all year long. In fact, I think that the quarterbacks that the Chiefs have faced have been better than what the Ravens have faced. So take that with a grain of salt. But it's going to be very difficult for Mahomes to have a rating above 120. And if there's ever a game where the Chiefs need him to play the game of his life, it's in this game. And going from that point, the Chiefs currently are 3-point underdogs. Patrick Mahomes has some ridiculous record like 8-1 whenever he's an underdog. So history has shown that in these underdog matchups for the Chiefs that Patrick Mahomes has done pretty well. The Chiefs have done pretty well. I'm still having a hard time seeing the silver lining. I'm trying to give you all these silver lining items. I'm still having a hard time. But the last one that I really want to bring up is Andy Reid. So Andy Reid versus his understudies in both the regular season and the playoffs has a 21-9 record. Andy Reid versus John Harbaugh through his entire career, as both of these men have been head coaches, Andy Reid has a 5-2 record versus John Harbaugh, who I believe is an outstanding head coach. Probably top 5, maybe top 3 in the entire NFL. And Andy Reid has won 5 out of 7 games. Andy Reid has never faced John Harbaugh in the playoffs, but versus his understudies in the playoffs, he is 4-0. Andy Reid has never lost a game versus an understudy in the playoffs. So there's all these things on paper, that say that the Chiefs should lose this game. The Ravens' offense has been so much better than the Chiefs all year long. All year long. Their defense has been better than the Chiefs. Although I will say the Chiefs' defense has been more consistent than the Ravens. The Chiefs' defense hasn't given up over 30 points in a single game in 2023. And the Ravens have done it twice. They've done it twice. So the Ravens defense can be had and has been had a couple times, whereas the Chiefs defense, they're going to keep it tight. All these things said, as I've talked to myself about this, I've thought about this, like I said, on paper, the Bills should win this game. But the game isn't played on a piece of paper. The game is played with the men in between the 53-yard distance from sideline to sideline. And in my opinion, I think the Chiefs have the character and the heart and the leadership to somehow win this game in thrilling fashion. I think this game's going to be close. And at the end of the game, somehow the Chiefs are going to pull it off. Whether that's Harrison Butker hitting a field goal in overtime or hitting a field goal as the clock expires, something's going to happen in this game. And although on paper, I think Baltimore should win this one, the way the Chiefs have played these past couple weeks, I feel like they've got some momentum building, and I think they're going to win this game. I'm going to say 24-21 Chiefs. Let me know down in the comments. That was hard for me to get to. Let me know down in the comments if you think the Chiefs are going to win this game. If on paper is just going to be what the Ravens have on paper is just going to be too much for the Chiefs to overcome, and you think the Ravens are going to the Super Bowl. Let me know if you believe in that Super Bowl logo color conspiracy. As you know, the last 2 Super Bowls, supposedly the teams that made it to the Super Bowl were in the color theme of the logo for that Super Bowl. This year's color theme has purple and kind of a crimson red, which sounds like it's going to be Baltimore versus the 49ers. But I don't really believe in these type of things. I just think they're interesting. But let me know down in the comments what you think about that. What do you think are the keys to this game are? Who do you think's going to win this matchup? Let me know down below. As always, thanks for stopping by. Boy, it would be sweet if the Chiefs went to another Super Bowl, especially this year where no one expected them to get there once the playoffs started. And here we are once again, another AFC Championship game. Get to watch at least one more Chiefs game this year. And I'm excited. But that's it. This is Gary signing out. Thanks for stopping by. We'll catch you later here on RGR Football.
Thanks for watching this video from the team at RGR Football. Click these videos to see more and subscribe to RGR Football.